Okay, we'll get going.
Mhm.
So today's class is going to talk about the rest of the Jewish calendar and the Festival of Sukkot, which starts this Friday night. So hopefully most of you or all of you are able to tune in for some or all of our high holiday services, which were Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Uh, Yom Kippur was, wow, just yesterday. It's hard to believe already. It ended last night. And I needed to get this class in to tell you about Sukkot because it starts this Friday night. So I'm going to talk about the Jewish calendar generally and the other holidays, and then focus specifically on the holiday of Sukkot. So I'm going to again share the screen, and we'll pull up the text that I used for the handout. Everybody can see that? Yes?
Mhm.
Okay. So so the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. In a way, sort of like the Muslim calendar is also a lunar calendar. I think this was where the term month actually came from. Month, I think, came from moon to represent the lunar cycle. Um, but the lunar cycle, actually, it takes the moon about 29 and a half days to circle around the Earth. So that means that every month in the Jewish calendar is going to be either 29 days or 30 days, right? Because it's a 29 and a half day cycle. And of course, in the solar calendar, the Western calendar, the months are either 30 or 31 days long. So you can see that once you do 12 months that are each about a day short, that would end up meaning 354 days during the year instead of 365. So you're about a third of a month off, right? About 11 days off. So unlike the Muslim calendar, so for those of you who pay attention to the Muslim calendar, you hear about Ramadan. That's the festival where or the month that they fast during the day and then have a big meal at night, where they normally would gather with large groups of people. But they have a strict lunar calendar. So this 11-day shortage just means that the next year Ramadan starts 11 days earlier in the solar year. So Ramadan can fall in June, it can fall in December, it can fall in March, whenever. They don't worry about when it falls in the solar year. Jewish tradition wanted to keep the calendar more or less aligned with the solar calendar, which meant we had to correct somehow to fill in those extra missing days. You with me so far? This is going to
Mhm.
be a little bit of math, but we'll get through this. Okay, so on the other hand, we want to keep to the lunar cycle, right? So if you do like we do in the Western calendar, it takes 365 and a quarter days for the Earth to go around the sun, which means every 4 years we add a day, right? But if we add just one day in a Jewish calendar, or even 11 days in the Jewish calendar, that would throw us off with the lunar cycle, and we can't do that. So what we did was we added, let's see, I move my little thing out of the way here. We have every 7 times out of 19, 7 out of every 19 years, we have a leap year, and we throw in a whole month. And you can see that that's just a little bit more than a third of the time. So that's how we keep the lunar calendar fixed with the solar calendar. Everybody get that so far?
Mhm.
And when we throw in an extra month, the last month of the Jewish calendar, we have different names for the months. So the last month in the Jewish calendar is Adar, and we're not very creative. So when we have a leap year, we just call the second month, the extra month, Adar 2. So you have Adar 1 and Adar 2 in a leap year. Okay, so that makes us a solar adjusted lunar calendar. If you're interested in all of the names of the months in the Jewish calendar, you can just flip to the end. Here they are. The name of the month in Hebrew, the number it is in the calendar, right? First, second, third, fourth, fifth month, seventh month, eighth month, ninth month, 10th month. When it usually falls in the solar year, September, October, etc. And the zodiac sign. I know that sounds weird, but Jews used to be into the zodiac just like everybody else 2,000 years ago. And so there's sort of a zodiac symbol for the months. Not that Jews ever pay attention to this anymore, but for those who are interested, that's what that is. Now you will notice something really weird here, and that is we just started the month of Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah, the new year, starts in the month of Tishrei, and yet it is, whoops, number 7, 7th month. Why isn't it the first month? Yeah, so, well, that's an interesting problem. The Bible actually tells us that the first month of the year is the month of Nisan, month of Aviv, the springtime month, the month that the festival of Passover falls in. So the Bible's already told us that the first month of the Jewish year is the month that Passover falls in. That happens in the springtime, and yet New Year's falls in the 7th month. So there's a long history to how Rosh Hashanah, the new year, ended up becoming called the new year. I won't go into the whole details, but I'll just tell you just an interesting thing so you can keep it straight in your head. Just this fascinating curiosity. The American calendar, of course, New Year's falls in the first month, January. And Independence Day in the American calendar is July 4th, which is the 7th month. Passover is the holiday of our freedom. So basically that's like our Independence Day, Passover. And in the Jewish calendar, Passover falls in the first month, whereas New Year's falls in the 7th month. Exactly the opposite of what the American calendar does. So that's just a clever way to remember it for now. But there's a complicated history if you want to Google it about how Rosh Hashanah became Rosh Hashanah. And but anyway, it's the new year. Another way to think about it is Rosh Hashanah counts, as we said when we talked about Rosh Hashanah, from the creation of the world, right? So it represents the creation of the world. And Passover is sort of the independence of the Jewish people. Unlike the United States, which was stuck with the Western calendar when we declared our independence on July 4th, the Jewish people were creating their own calendar. So why not start our national calendar in the first month of our calendar cycle, right? And then, oh yeah, by the way, the world was created in month 7. So anyway, that's another way to think about it. Okay, so that kind of covers that. So the year is 5781. We just clicked over into the year 5781, starting on Rosh Hashanah. And why did we pick 5781? Well, symbolically, originally, literally, people, Jewish people, thousands of years ago thought that's how old the world was. Really, until modern times, that's what people thought. The world was only a few thousand years old. And they based that on counting the ages of the people mentioned in the book of Genesis and when they begat their children. And if you work backwards, I guess that's how you count. Obviously, science tells us that the world is billions of years old. So I would just say that we use this as a symbolic idea that we're counting since the creation of the world, not an actual scientific counting. So the sages calculated the destruction of the temple, which we say happened in 70 CE in the Western calendar. I'll talk about that in a second, actually. But the sages said that was in the Jewish calendar year of 3830. And so now we can figure out how to correlate the current Western calendar year with the Jewish calendar year. I use the term CE over here. Jews don't use AD and BC. So AD is an abbreviation for the Latin Anno Domini, which means year of our Lord. And it's referring to the year that Jesus was born, right? The Western calendar is a Christian calendar, so they would naturally count from the time of Jesus. They chose to count from the date they assumed Jesus was born. Since we do not consider Jesus our Lord, we don't use the term AD, but we recognize that the Western calendar is the calendar that everybody uses. So we call it CE, which stands for Common Era, ERA. When I was a kid, I thought it was common error, like somebody made a mistake, but That's because I was a kid. I didn't know the word era. So common era. So the way the world commonly counts years, at least in the Western world, is 70. That's when the temple was destroyed. In the Jewish calendar, that's 3830. So again, with a little bit of math, sorry for the math in today's class. You subtract 70 from 3830 and you get 3760. And if you add that number to the Christian year, then you'll get the Jewish year. So for instance, we're going to be entering 2021 in the Western calendar, and you add 3760 to that, and you get 5781, which is the Jewish calendar. Now, since we start our calendar on Rosh Hashanah, which is usually in September or October, we're still in the year 2020, right? But we've already clicked over to the next year in the Jewish calendar, 5781. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? Okay. That's about all the math I think we have to worry about for now. So now let's talk about the day and the week. The day in the Jewish tradition starts at nightfall. Okay, so here's the thing. Again, in the Western calendar, we start at midnight, which is great, midnight, right? But that only works when we all have clocks or watches, and we can synchronize our clocks or watches with everybody else's watch. By the way, I like to mention at this point that if you go to the old cities in Europe and you see in the little towns, there was always a clock tower in the middle of the town. The reason there was a clock tower in the middle of the town was so people could synchronize their clocks with everybody else's clock in town, right? Everybody knew what time it was. That's before, the modern age, when we have electricity and we've got the internet and telephones and everything else to synchronize our clocks. So midnight is great if everybody has a clock and everybody can agree what time it is, because there's no natural signal that nature gives us that it's midnight, right? You can't see the sun, and the moon doesn't necessarily up in the sky, and the stars don't tell you when it's midnight. There's nothing that'll tell you it's midnight. There's only 2 times during the day when everybody can agree what time it is. Sunrise, sunset. Everybody can agree when sunrise and sunset is, because you can look outside and you can see when that is. So you would think, hey, Rabbi, why don't you start your day at sunrise? After all, if you're a farmer, and most of us were farmers thousands of years ago, the sun comes up, the rooster crows, you get out of bed, you stretch, and you say, I'm going to start my day. So start the day when everybody starts their day at sunrise. No, we had to decide we're going to start it at sunset. Why did we decide to start at sunset? Because in the first chapter of Genesis, after every day of creation, it says there was evening, there was morning, day 1. There was evening, there was morning, day 2. So clearly the Bible is telling us the day starts with evening. Evening comes before morning. So we decided to start the day in the evening. Now, question then is, when is evening? So I said that there's 2 times when everybody can kind of agree what time it is, sunrise, sunset. But when we said evening, there were some people who wanted to say, well, that's obviously sunset. But then Jews like to argue about everything, just a thing. And so, so the question was, does evening when the sun sets, or is it when it's dark outside? And then you're going to ask me, okay, Rabbi, how dark is dark? Well, again, remember that we don't have smog and we don't have light pollution. So you can look up at the sky and you can see the stars. So and we got very precise about this. When you can see 3 stars in the sky at one glance, that's dark. So there was a dispute amongst Jews. Do we count sunset or 3 stars? When does the day start? Now, normally, who cares? Again, before there were clocks, before there were appointments, before there was a crazy frenetic thing about time, which is kind of a modern thing, nobody really cared. It's about 30 minutes, 40 minutes difference. Who cares? But it does matter on Shabbat because you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath. Now you have to decide, when does the day start and when does it end? And so for that purpose, we decided we're not going to decide. We're going to play it safe. And we're going to start the Sabbath at the earlier time, sunset, and we're going to end it at the later time when it's dark outside, 3 stars. And that way, for sure, we're not working on the Sabbath because we started the day at the end of the earliest time, and we ended it at the latest time. And then the rabbis did one more thing for people like me who are procrastinators. I don't know if any of you are. Wait to the last minute. So they said, okay, just in case you procrastinate and you're working up until the last minute and accidentally cross the line into sunset, that's a big problem. We're going to back up the start of the Sabbath day by 18 minutes. Don't ask me why it's 18. I don't know, 18 minutes. We're going to back up the start time to 18 minutes. So we're going to start the Sabbath at 18 minutes before sunset and then end it when it's dark outside. And the total ends up being a 25-hour period because you added 18 minutes at the beginning and another 40 minutes or so at the end, right? So altogether, it's about 25 hours. Okay, so so that's about the when the day begins. The days of the week in the Bible are not named, right? So it's not Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And you can tell, you know, if you can Google these and find out, but Sunday obviously is named after the sun. Monday is named after the moon. Wednesday was Woden's day, one of the Norse gods. Friday was Freya's day, another Norse god. Saturday was named after Saturn, etc. So, but we didn't give names to the days of the week. We just call them day 1, day 2, day 3. The only day that has a name is the Sabbath, and it was called Shabbat. Shabbat is the 7th day of the week. And as I like to tell visiting groups of Christians, we get a number of Christians who visit, and I tell them, I talk to them a little about our faith and our services and so on Friday nights. We used to when we had people come on Friday nights. Everybody agrees that the Sabbath is Saturday, okay? And I get some raised eyebrows when I say that because Christians take off on Sunday. Sunday's their major day of worship. But I point out 2 things. First of all, if you look at any Western calendar, and all Western languages you read from left to right, the left column is always Sunday, and the right column is always Saturday, which means that Saturday is the last day of the week, 7th day. So clearly the Sabbath is Saturday. And for those of you who speak Spanish, you know that Saturday is called Sábado in Spanish, and Sábado comes from Shabbat, Sabbath. So everybody really agrees that Saturday is the Sabbath. The Christians actually intentionally changed the day of worship to Sunday. I read the Catholic Catechism. Somebody gave me a copy. And for whatever reason, this was one of the only places I looked. I don't know why I bothered, but I did. I looked it up. And the Catholic Church intentionally changed the day of worship to Sunday for religious reasons. Because for them, it's the Lord's Day. They believe that that's the day that Jesus arose. And there's also a theological idea that if 7 days represents the creation and this world, then Sunday is not only the 8th day, but it's the first day of the new world, right? So it represents the new order. So in Christian theology, they wanted to make Sunday the major day, but everybody agrees that Shabbat in the Sabbath is Saturday. We're not allowed to do any work on the Shabbat, and I'll talk more about that in another occasion. So here's a few other things about the Jewish calendar. Rosh Chodesh means the new month. Rosh, remember, means head. So Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year or the new year. Chodesh is the word for a new moon. And so the head of the new year, the new month, is Rosh Chodesh. And that is a semi-holiday. And sometimes it's celebrated for 2 days, again, because the lunar cycle is 29.5 days. So sometimes it's the new month is celebrated on 2 days in a calendar. It's a complicated calendar to figure out to make it work, to keep it in sync with the solar year and the lunar cycle. Okay, we've already talked about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as the days of awe. The next major holidays are called Shalosh Regalim. Shalosh is the Hebrew word for 3, and Regalim comes from the word regal, which means leg. And Regalim were pilgrimage festivals. You'd use your legs to walk to Jerusalem. You make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate these 3 festivals. They're all mentioned in the 5 books of Moses. So the one that's coming up, which we'll talk about in a bit, is the festival of Feast of Booths, Sukkot. And then in the springtime, as we said, was Passover. And then 50 days after Passover is Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. And we'll talk more about those later in the class. These are the 3 pilgrimage festivals, 3 times a year when Jews, if they could, would go to Jerusalem to celebrate. And they are the other holidays that are mentioned in the 5 books of Moses, besides Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Then we have holidays that came after the 5 books of Moses. So one of them is Purim, the festival of Purim, which is the holiday that celebrates the events in the book of Esther in the Bible. And then there's a post-biblical holiday called Hanukkah, which we'll talk about in December. There's no biblical book, no book in the Jewish Bible that describes Hanukkah, although in the Catholic Bible, there are 2 books that describe the events of Hanukkah. That's Maccabees 1 and Maccabees 2. They're found in a collection called the Apocrypha in a Catholic Bible. And we'll talk more about Hanukkah later. And then in the summertime, a holiday that a lot of Jews don't know about because everybody's on vacation and nobody pays attention, sadly in a way, is Tisha B'Av. So Tisha means 9, Av is the month, and Ba means in. So it's the 9th day of the month of Av. It's a day of mourning, and it commemorates the destruction of the first temple and the second temple by a bizarre coincidence, or some people might say not a coincidence. Both the first temple and the second temple were destroyed on exactly the same day in the Jewish calendar, a little over 600 years apart. So the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 before the Common Era, and the second temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70. And both of them happened on the 9th day of the Jewish month of Av. So as you can imagine, that's a day of mourning and sadness for the Jews. We read on that day the Book of Lamentations, which is a biblical book of dirges, that is laments, poems of lamenting. Some of them are very graphic and disturbing about the destruction of the temple and the city by the Babylonians in 586. We believe that book was probably written about the time of the events took place, some by an eyewitness or somebody who heard from an eyewitness to the events, and may have been written by several different authors. They may have been a collection of dirges that were put together to create one book. But in any case, it happens in the summertime. A lot of Jews may not know about it, but there it is, Tisha B'Av. If you go to summer camp, Jewish summer camp, of course, it's likely that the Tisha B'Av will fall while you're at summer camp, and then you would definitely know about it. Because the camp, it's a day of mourning, and it's a day of fasting, and like I say, you read the Book of Lamentations. So those are the original, yes, go, yeah, question?
I was saying, do like conservative keep like the 3 weeks and the 9 days and everything and that time, or is it just that one day?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. You've been studying. Right, so
No.
that's good. So yeah, there's 3 weeks that lead up to the 9th of Av, and it begins on the 17th day of the month of Tammuz. So if you look down at this thing here, you'll see that Tammuz is the 4th month, and then comes Av, the 5th month. So on the 17th day of this month, begins a semi-mourning period for many Jews, which concludes with the 9th day of Av, 3 weeks later. The reason the 17th of Tammuz, and which is considered a semi-fast day, is the beginning of that period. Is that's the day that they say the walls of the city of Jerusalem were breached by the Babylonian conquerors. They breached the city walls on the 17th of Tammuz, and it took them another 3 weeks to destroy the temple on the Temple Mount. So there was intense fighting in the city for about 3 weeks after they breached the city walls before they could get to the temple. Of course, the temple was had its own compound, walls surrounding it, and towers guarding it. So it took a while for them to conquer the temple and then destroy that. So that 3-week period is sometimes considered a semi-mourning period. Typically, Jewish weddings are not conducted during that time. I would say most conservative Jews are not so meticulous, except that no weddings are done during that time period. There is a sense among some Jews today that you know, it's particularly after 1948, where we are now back in our homeland and we have a government in Israel, and about half the Jewish half the world's Jewish population lives in Israel. That some of the mourning that has been going on for centuries before about the loss and destruction, we can diminish some of that now because we've got a country again. It seems odd to be continually mourning about something from 2,000 years ago when we have a country again. So, so I think that's one, but that's a good question to ask. Okay, let me go back to sharing, go back up to the top here. So that's Tisha B'Av. Speaking of the modern state of Israel, that has created a couple of new holidays. Yom Ha'atzmaut is Israel Independence Day. And Israel's Memorial Day, right? We have Memorial Day on May 30th in America. Israel's Memorial Day is called Yom HaZikaron, which means Day of Memorial. Yom means day, and Atzmaut means independence. And in Israel, interestingly enough, Memorial Day is the day right before Independence Day. So imagine in the United States that instead of having Memorial Day on May 30th, it was July 3rd. And also imagine in Israel, first of all, everybody serves in the military, and almost everybody, every family has somebody who died in combat, or has a relative or a friend who died, knows somebody. A little bit less so now because thankfully there hasn't been so many wars, but certainly in the beginning and continuing today, Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day in Israel, is taken very seriously. The air raid sirens go off during the day and the whole country comes to a stop. Traffic stops, people get out of their cars, whatever you're doing, and if you're having a meeting, you stop the meeting for a moment of silence. There's programming on the TV and on the radio about Memorial Day, the various memorials taking place around the country. Speeches are given. It's a very, very serious, solemn day, Memorial Day. And then as soon as the sun goes down, right, so the day clicks over and now it's Independence Day, people go out and celebrate. And they're singing and dancing and so on. I'm not sure what it's like now, but I know I was there, lived there many years ago for a couple different Independence Day celebrations. There's dancing in the street and music and so on. It's quite a celebration. And that's kind of one of the ironic things about Judaism. Again, we take these opposite things, mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, and celebration, and we smash them together and say, this is part of life and this is part of life, and we're going to put them really close together, and because they're both part of life. And so it also kind of highlights the idea that independence came at a price. And so first we mourn the price, the loss of lives, and then we celebrate independence. And then is the other day that's added to the Jewish calendar in the 20th century was Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah. Shoah means disaster. We can talk about that more when I have one class session on anti-Semitism. I don't specifically talk about the Holocaust. Some Jews do not like the term Holocaust because it literally means a burnt offering. And of course, millions of Jews were cremated by the Nazis. But the objection is that that implies that it was some kind of a ritual sacrifice. And we don't, I mean, very few Jews, I think, would see it as a sacrifice. They just see it as a big disaster. So the term in Hebrew is Yom HaShoah, which that's what that means. And we wanted to have a new day in the calendar to memorialize the lost lives in the Holocaust. So that's the day that we use. And it comes right after Passover and before Yom HaAtzmaut in the springtime. Okay, here's another term you need to know for the calendar, Chol HaMoed, which is Chol means secular, Kodesh means holy. So, holidays. The English word holiday originally comes from holy days, right? And so a holy day would be a Yom Kadosh, a holy day. Secular is Chol. And so what you have is there's two Jewish festivals that are 1 week long. One is Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, and the other, the one that we're about to do, and the other is in the springtime, the Feast of Passover. There's 7-day holidays. Only the first day is a holy day that you're not allowed to do any work. It's like the Sabbath. The intervening days are considered important, but not holy days. So you can work. And so those days are called Chol HaMoed, the secular days of the festival, so to speak. I hope that makes sense. And then the other thing you need to know is this other expression, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot. So how do I explain this? In the old days, people didn't have calendars. And like I said, it was a lunar calendar, and you had to determine when the new moon was. The new moon was the beginning, the first day of the new month. And by the way, Muslims still do this. They have witnesses to testify that the new moon appeared, and that's when the month of Ramadan starts, right? And then they tell people all over the world. That's the way we used to do it. We used to have witnesses come into a court and testify we saw the new moon, and so therefore the month starts. The problem with that is, before the internet and telephones and so on, how do you get the word out to everybody else once you've proven that it's the new month? So one thing they used to do is they would light bonfires on hilltops. And from hilltop to hilltop, the bonfires would be lit. And by the end of the day, everybody would know when the new month was. But then there was this other group of the Samaritans or somebody who calculated slightly differently and would sometimes light bonfires on a different day. And that threw everybody off, right? So then whose smoke signals do you pay attention to? So it's 29.5-day lunar cycle. So the new month had to be either, let's say, Tuesday, or it was going to be Wednesday. It couldn't be Friday, right? It had to be one of those 2 days. So what they decided was, if you don't live in the country where we can get the word out to you when the first of the month was, then keep both possible days of the festival, and that way you for sure are celebrating the festival on the right day. So that became the standard. And then 2,000 years ago, we ended up standardizing the calendar anyway. So now we do know, and we can calculate when Rosh Hashanah is going to fall 50 years from now, 1,000 years from now. We can tell you when Rosh Hashanah is going to fall because we figured it out mathematically. But we still keep to the old school of, if you live inside of Israel, you only have to do 1 day of the festival. If you live outside of Israel, you have to keep 2 days of the festival. And that is Yom Tov Sheni, the second day of the festival, for Galuyot, in the exile outside of Israel, right? So that's why we're going to do 2 festival days of Sukkot at the beginning, and then Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days that you could work. And then at the end of the period is another holiday called Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of assembly, and Simchat Torah, because we have 2 days outside of Israel. And those 2 days are also festivals. And same thing with Passover. The first 2 days of Passover, holy days, last 2 days of Passover, holy days. And instead of celebrating Passover for only 7 days, outside of Israel, we celebrated for 8 days to keep that extra day. So I know that's all very complicated, but I wanted to give you all that information so you have an idea of what's going on with the Jewish calendar. Now let's talk about the holiday that's coming up. It's called the Feast of Booths. All of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, the Shalosh Regalim, have 2 major aspects about them. Number 1, they were agricultural festivals, meaning they were harvest festivals. You would go out and harvest your crops and bring them in and then celebrate to God because you had a good harvest, right? Thank God that we had some food and we're going to celebrate. So there was a harvest festival aspect to it. But they also added a historical significance to it. Passover is obvious. It was the Exodus from Egypt. Shavuot, not so obvious, but rabbis, after a very close reading of the book of Exodus and fudging just a very tiny little bit, figured out that 50 days after Passover, it turns out we're standing at Mount Sinai and we're getting the 10 Commandments. So Shavuot represents getting the 10 Commandments.
They can see me?
Pardon? We can't see you. I just saw your name, your iPhone name. Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, represents the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years. So we wandered in the desert for 40 years, all right, from the Exodus from Egypt until we got into the Holy Land. And when we wandered, we lived in temporary dwellings. And it turns out the Feast of Booths is about living in temporary dwellings. And so we attached that festival to the idea of wandering for 40 years. Why do we celebrate 40 years of wandering on one particular week in the calendar? That's an interesting question. I would just say that since it was already a Feast of Booths, I think that's why we associated it. But there it is. So that's what it represents. It was probably the festival of Sukkot that the pilgrims had in mind when they celebrated the first Thanksgiving in October. The pilgrims were religious Christians. They read the Bible very well. I have a whole talk on this that I gave earlier in a sermon once. And they knew that when you collected the harvest, you were supposed to have a feast and celebrate to God. Well, the fall harvest festival is Sukkot. So very likely when they were celebrating Thanksgiving, that's what they had in mind when they did it. So what are the rituals that we do on this holiday? First is to build a booth. And of course, since we're a religion of rules, there's all the rules about how to build it. There's instructions. You can look on a website. And I think actually we put on our website information about how to build the booth if you'd like to do it. When I lived in California, I lived in Los Angeles for about 12 years. The weather's beautiful in California. And so I built a sukkah in our parking space in our apartment complex. The landlord let us do that. And we actually slept out there a couple of times because the weather's nice. I don't recommend sleeping outside in Houston. The mosquitoes and the weather, it's usually not such a great time to sleep out there. But if you would like to, you can. Anyway, you build a booth, and people often decorate it with posters and streamers, and sometimes they use Christmas lights, which we call sukkah lights. You can get them on sale in January after Christmas is over, and then save them until September, and then put them up in your sukkah to just not obviously Christian pictures, but if it's fruit or just colored lights, not bad to use for decoration in your sukkah. So some people sleep there. Typically you eat outside in the sukkah. You invite guests to come into the sukkah, not this year obviously, but in other years. And so you do all kinds of things. Now, one of the things you also do is invite some spiritual guests called ushpizin. I gave a talk on this once, so I'll just let you in on a secret that a lot of Jews don't know. The word ushpizin is not a Hebrew word. It's not an Aramaic word. It's a borrowed word. It comes from Latin. Jews lived in the Roman world at the time. And the Latin word entered the English language as well with a slightly different sound, hospice, right? You want to be hospitable. What does that mean? You're a good host. You're going to bring in guests. And the ushpizin are guests. But we invite spiritual guests, right? Our ancestors. Abraham traditionally was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph, Moses, Aaron, and David, one for each day of the Sukkah festival. In the modern egalitarian world, we invite women to along with the men. So Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and his wife, Rebecca, Jacob and one of his wives, Leah, Joseph and his mother, the other wife, Rachel, Moses and his sister, Miriam, who was also a prophetess, Aaron and Devorah, another prophet, and then David and Ruth, his great-great-grandmother. And so one of the things that you can ask is, why do we invite these people? What did they tell us? What did their lives teach us? Is there things we can learn from their lives when we invite them spiritually into our sukkah? But that's one of the things that we do. And then we take what's called a lulav and an etrog. So lulav means a palm branch. We attach 3 myrtle twigs and 3 willow twigs to it. And an etrog is citron, which is something like a lemon, but not a lemon. It's a cousin to a lemon. And these 4 species we hold together in our hands. We say a certain blessing, and we shake them in all 4 directions, and then up and down. That's a tradition that's been for thousands of years. We continue to do that today. Jewish people have interpreted different meanings to the elements of the lulav and etrog. So the palm branch is a thin spine, right? So it's like your backbone. And the myrtle leaves are kind of roundish, so they're like eyes. And willow leaves are kind of longer, so they're like lips. And the etrog is kind of heart-shaped, so they say it's like the heart. And so symbolically, we're taking all the different parts of our body, our eyes. So what we see, we try to see the world with positive eyes. We only use our lips to speak good things. We have our heart in the right place, and we have a backbone to stand up to evil, right? So take all these parts of our body, and we represent that God is all around us by shaking it in all the different directions. And that's done each of the 7 days of the holiday. When we have services in the sanctuary again, you also take your lulav and etrog and you make a circle around the sanctuary with the lulav and etrog, and you sing songs called Hoshanot. So if you know about the Christian Bible, when the New Testament, I guess, when Jesus comes into Jerusalem, they're singing Hosanna, Hosanna. That comes from the Hebrew Hoshana, which means save us, please. And during the Feast of Sukkot, we sing these songs of Hoshanot, asking God to look out for us during the year. That's what Hoshanot there. And on the 7th day of Sukkot, the last day of Sukkot, is Hoshana Rabbah, the great Hosanna, the great Hoshana, where we make 7 circles around the sanctuary, and then take a group of willows and beat the leaves to shake them off the branch. So Sukkot is called the feast of the Zman Simchatenu, the time of our great joy. And we're supposed to be celebrating and happy. And then we read this depressing book called Ecclesiastes. I don't know if anybody's read Ecclesiastes. Anybody read Ecclesiastes? It's a book of philosophy, but it's not very uplifting. At least a lot of it isn't. It starts out by saying, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. You know, what is life? It's all meaningless. The days pass and soon it's all over. so you can get a kind of a depressing view of life from a lot of Ecclesiastes, but what it does emphasize again for us is that every day should count in our lives, right? And one of the reasons for sitting out in the sukkah, in the booth, is that particularly I think for city dwellers, those of us who live in cities and we're in comfortable homes that are air conditioned, and we got all the furniture we like and the stuff, you know, that we get from Costco or wherever we go shopping, and we feel comfortable. It's all stuff, you know, it's not the important thing in life. And I think one of the things about Sukkot, particularly coming right after the High Holy Days, when we've done a lot of introspection about what's important in our lives and how we want to change our lives and add more meaning to our lives, Sukkot comes and reminds us, you know, it's not about the stuff. It's about the world. So first of all, we go out to the booths to see nature, to feel, unfortunately, in Houston, let's say, the humidity, you know, which we isolate ourselves from. But you know what? There's a real world out there, and it's not so comfortable all the time. And sometimes it rains, and sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes you can see the stars, and you can see the sky, and you can see the sunlight, and you can see trees, right? There's a world out there, and it reminds us that this little cocoon that we've created for ourselves isolates us from the big world and the big picture. So it forces us to go outside and get away from our stuff and back to the basics of what's important. And the other thing that's important is relationships. And that goes back to the Ushpizin. We're inviting friends and guests into our sukkah because what's really important about life is the relationships we have with each other, our family and our friends. And so, so that's kind of part of the meaning of the festival of Sukkot as well. So, so Kohelet is kind of a reminder of that as well, that life is a gift and every moment is precious, and we should make the most of what we have. Then at the end of the festival of Sukkot comes this tacked on holiday called Shmini Atzeret. Shmini means eighth, and Atzeret means assembly. So there's this last day of assembly before we end the fall holiday cycle. In Israel, it's the same day as Simchat Torah, but outside of Israel, we separate them and make them 2 different days. And Simchat Torah is the day when we celebrate the giving of the Torah. I know that the 10 Commandments we do on Shavuot, but here we want to celebrate the whole Torah. And we do that by finishing the annual cycle of Torah readings. So we end the last chapter of the book of Deuteronomy on the night of Simchat Torah. The only time at night that we open the scrolls and read from them is on Simchat Torah. We read the last chapter of Deuteronomy. And then in the morning, we read the last chapter of Deuteronomy again, and then take another scroll out and read the first chapter of Genesis to start the Torah reading over. So we never actually finish the Torah. We keep it going in a cycle. So we end it and right away start again the next day. So that's the celebration of Simchat Torah. Usually there's a lot of dancing, a lot of singing. Again, this is going to be hard to do this year because of the virus, but we do a lot of singing and dancing, and there's candy for kids usually. At Beth Yeshurun, when you circle around the sanctuary in the evening, we do it 7 times again. And the last time, what we used to do, and hopefully next year we'll do again, parents, adults bring bags of candy, and the kids come with empty bags, and they circle around the sanctuary and collect candy from everybody. So it's like a Jewish Halloween, so to speak, but celebrating the Torah with sweetness so that the kids get excited about that. And we give them little Torahs to dance with also. So that's the festival of Simchat Torah. And that is pretty much it. So do you have any questions for me about any of this stuff today?
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
The first one is there a like proper way to dispose of these symbolic things like the citron?
Oh.
You just throw it away? And my second question is that I noticed that the zodiac signs are like a month off from.
Oh, are they? Oh, I'm
for like, if I'm a Gemini, and then based on the months that we saw in the presentation, I would be a Cancer.
Really? Oh my goodness. I have to look at that because I'm a Gemini also. It didn't come in June?
It looked like there was like a month difference. Like
Oh, well,
June to July was Cancer, it looked like. So
weird.
my
Okay.
question was if
Okay.
there's like a, is it someone a different sign based on
I
this
don't
calendar?
know. Let me answer that question first and go back to the other one. So yeah, the zodiac, of course, the zodiac is all kind of a pagan thing. But interestingly enough, archaeologists in Israel in decades ago already discovered some ancient synagogues from the early centuries, first couple centuries of the Common Era, and on these in the floor of these synagogues were mosaic tiles of different kinds of pictures, and on several of these synagogues had a zodiac sign on the floor of the synagogue. And it was really bizarre. And everybody's going, well, how can they do that? The rabbis all said this is pagan nonsense and you shouldn't do it. But clearly they were doing it. And so archaeologists debate about how that ended up happening, whether, maybe these, they hired, a pagan floor designer, who does other places and do our synagogue too. So they just did what they knew how to do. But other people just assume that Jews kind of were into astrology also. I don't know why the months are off though. The other question you had was really good question though. What do you do to dispose of it? So I don't know how you knew I asked that question, but yeah. Once something's used for a ritual purpose, it's like, can you just throw it away? Like it had some holiness about it. You can't just throw it away. So what people do usually is they set it aside until it becomes kind of not really good for anything, and then you can throw it away. Or other people will wrap it up like in newspapers or something and then dispose of it. Etrogs, some people like to put cloves in it and use it as a spice box. They kind of shrivel up over time, but the cloves still are there. But you'd have a lot of those after a couple of years. By the way, etrogs are kind of expensive. They're not just lemons. They can cost $35–40. They're like very, very expensive because they can't have any bugs or whatever. I mean, it has to be. And by the way, they also use pesticides to keep them bug free. So if you don't eat them necessarily, and certainly wash them thoroughly. Just warning you about that. We had but you know what you could do? We have a congregant who actually took some etrogs and there's seeds inside, just like lemons. He planted a tree, and within a number of years, he had a tree, and then he started growing his own etrogs, get them for free, or you can go into business and sell them to your friends. But yeah, you can't just throw them out though. Any other questions?
Yes, I had a quick question. So, where can we get some of this stuff? Like, I don't know where we get Merkle from.
Right.
Where we get
Yeah, so on short notice like this, it's going to be a little difficult this year. Normally, there are some websites that you can order them from. Now, of course, with the internet, it's pretty easy. You can just Google lulav etrog, and there's places that sell them. Or you can order them through Beth Yeshurun next year. We usually send out about August a notice that if you'd like to order them through us, you can do that, and when you can get them. And again, normally, I feel terrible about this year, but this is the way it is. Normally, people could also come in, even if you don't have your own set. We have some extra sets of them that you could come for services, and people pass them around, and you could use it to shake the lulav. It's just everything is going to be more complicated this year because of the virus. But next year it'll be easier to do. There's also kits for a sukkah, and I'm going to be putting together. I bought a kit about 15 years ago. We've used it every year since then. It was a little expensive, but when you figure you get to use it for 15 years, then it's not so bad. And it was designed for hot weather climates because it has zippered windows. That's like a plastic tarp that goes around the sides, but then it has zippered windows that you open up, and it has screens behind it so that it lets the air in. And so pretty nice. And it goes together in 1 hour. You can put the whole thing together in an hour. It's pretty easy. But if you don't, you can just take some 2x4s, nail them together, use a tarp, just hang a tarp around the sides. The top is supposed to be made out of branches. So either in California, we used palm branches because there's palm trees all over. Here, it's a little harder to do that. You can use bamboo mats. Bamboo also counts. Anything that lets the water in and you can see somewhat of the sky through it. It has to be open and it has to be made out of branches. You can probably find instructions on, well, My Jewish Learning has some, and of course our website. Jennifer Rosenzweig is our program director, has put together a lot of information about how to do that. So, any other questions?
This is a question about the prayer book. So I picked up a prayer book. How do I return it? Do I just make an appointment and return it?
Yes, yeah.
I can answer that question.
There you go. Yeah, you take it.
I'll take that one. You can bring it back starting this week, Friday or Tuesday or Friday, because those are the days that we have the meal pickups from that 12:30 to 2 slot. We'll do that for 2 weeks. And then if you can't come any of those times, then on Sunday, the 18th,
Yeah, that's the first.
Okay, so that's after all the Chagim. Then Sunday we'll be here all afternoon to get all the rest of the books. Did you get an email from me? Because I thought I got everybody's an email today. Maybe not. I'll double check and make sure.
Yeah.
But I just sent it this afternoon or this morning. But I'm gonna write your name down. I'm gonna check and make sure I've got your email address.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
WhatsApp group chat.
Oh, yes, right. WhatsApp group. Yes. Okay. So I need to create that, right? I guess I need phone. I should put in the phone numbers, right? Is there a way? Do I need to?
Everybody has WhatsApp.
Yeah. Well, for those people who do, they can. We can create a WhatsApp group chat. But it has to be the phone numbers. Do I invite you to that, or how does that work? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you create a group and then invite people from your contact list to your phone book.
Okay. All right. I'll work on that.
I think I can help you, and I can help Lisa do it.
Okay. All right. That's good.
Between 3 of us, we'll figure out how to do it.
Okay. Great. Okay. It's not a bad idea. I don't. I'll start checking it more often. I have a few people who have group chats on WhatsApp, and I don't follow it as often as I should, but I'll start doing it more now that we'll have ours for sure.
Yeah, it's just hard to be so distant.
Yes, I totally understand that. Totally understand that. I think we all feel that, and it makes things like this pretty tough. But thank you all for being here, in spite of everything else. Any other questions? So some people may want to watch the debates, which are just about to start, or maybe just starting. And the rest of us will probably have a couple of beers before we do that. But in any case, thank you all for coming to the class today, and look forward to seeing you. The next time will be the 18th. The next will be Sunday after Sukkot and Simchas Torah is over with. If you're not on hopefully you're on our email list and you're getting emails about when people are what we're doing. And there's some things coming up next Monday night. If you like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we have one of our members has done a talk about her in the past, and she's going to update it. She's going to present a nice talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg next Monday night at 7 o'clock. So you can tune into that.
I'll give some of those links to Lisa to put in the email that she sends out in the next few weeks until we make sure everybody's on all the email lists. So
Great.
I'll give those to her.
Cool. All right. Good night, everybody.
Night. Thanks.
Right.